fatal collision. Colleagues remember a congresswoman who was a pro-life champion. Abortion in America. How pro-life doctors are confronting new threats to their protection of the unborn. Standing in the breach. A pro-faith, pro-life, and pro-family message from the head of the Knights of Columbus. And caring for the Pope. The Holy Father promotes the nurse who saved his life. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 4th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. John Vianney. I'm Tracy Sable. Tensions continue to mount following the recent visit of Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. Today, China conducted precision missile strikes in the Taiwan Strait as part of a multi-force military exercise. Seen as a response by Beijing to this week's visit to Taiwan by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Japan is protesting that 5 of the missiles landed inside its exclusive economic zone. Taiwan's president issued a statement criticizing China's actions, but also assured allies that further escalation was not required. A heavy hearts on Capitol Hill today as lawmakers and staff mourn Indiana Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. She, along with 2 of her staff members and the driver of another car, died in a car crash yesterday afternoon. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more on the life of the pro-life representative. Eric?
Yes, good evening, Tracy. Yes, a very somber day up here on Capitol Hill as lawmakers remembered Indiana Congresswoman and also South Bend native Congressman Jackie Walorski. She was known as a tireless worker, one who was a no-nonsense type of woman, but also a champion in pro-life. She always fought for the rights of the unborn. The flags at the U.S. Capitol lowered to half staff as news broke of the death of Indiana Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. While under the dome, lawmakers mourned her, including Indiana's 2 senators.
I, for one, am truly devastated. I know that Jackie loved the state of Indiana. She loved the Hoosiers throughout the state. She had an incredible sense of humor, incredibly smart, so talented in many ways, and she'll be missed.
Always a good friend, and she was a tireless, congresswoman that represented her area well, and 2 others lost their lives as well. That's just something when it occurs, it's when it's close to home.
Police say the 58-year-old was traveling with 2 aides in her Indiana district when they were involved in a head-on crash. The accident killed the congresswoman, her district director, 27-year-old Zachary Potts, and her communication director, 28-year-old Emma Thompson, along with the driver in the other car. Walorski was first elected to represent Indiana's 2nd congressional district in 2012. Her husband said in a statement, quote, "She has returned home to be with her Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Please keep her family in your thoughts and prayers." Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, says pro-life groups lost a leader.
She just lived on mission. Even while she was here, she was always excited about the times and places the Lord had placed her and the special role he had entrusted her with.
And prior to working into politics, she was a television news reporter out of South Bend. And prior to that, she and her husband, well, they ran a missionary in Romania where they helped underprivileged children with both medical and food supplies. So she was definitely a woman who gave her life to the Lord. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
State courts in Michigan have handed pro-life supporters a split decision. An appeals court has overruled one judge who stopped enforcement of an abortion ban, but a second judge has granted a restraining order requested by Governor Gretchen Whitmer to block that same law. The Biden administration continues its push for abortion expansion, sending Vice President Kamala Harris to states across the country. Today, she traveled to Massachusetts to meet with a group of Democratic state lawmakers. But one pro-lifer tells us the fight to save the unborn is only going to intensify. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, here at the White House, President Joe Biden continues to recover from COVID, and even though he tested positive again, his doctor says he feels very well and his cough is improving. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris drawing criticism from pro-lifers who are digging in for the long and critical fight. In Massachusetts, Vice President Kamala Harris holds what the White House calls a roundtable on reproductive rights.
The work that is happening here in Massachusetts is a model of work that can and we believe should happen around the country.
But we spoke with a pro-life strategist who says the vice president's message is going to fail.
I have to remind the VP that abortion is the #1 killer in the Black community. And half of those abortions are little Black girls like her. And she could be using her time and energy today and every other day to give them a chance at life.
Allison Centofonte urges the pro-life community to stay strong.
We are winning, both on truth, science, logic, and we have some of the most powerful, winsome, beautiful, thoughtful, strategic messengers leading this movement, showing that women are worth fighting for, children are worth fighting for.
Meanwhile, President Biden holds another virtual meeting, this time with business and labor leaders, about the controversial Inflation Reduction Act.
This bill will save the American people and Medicare hundreds of billions of dollars.
But the Republican National Committee tweets, another analysis shows Biden's Inflation Reduction Act is a total scam. Also today, a judge in Russia has convicted American basketball star Brittany Griner of drug possession and smuggling and sentenced her to 9 years in prison. President Biden quickly released a statement saying Russia is wrongfully detaining Brittany. It's unacceptable, and I call on Russia to release her immediately. The president added he also wants to bring home safely Paul Whelan. He's another American imprisoned in Russia on an espionage conviction. The Michigan man is serving 16 years. The U.S. government has denounced those charges against Whelan, calling them false. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has canceled plans to teach a class at a Washington, D.C. law school this fall amid threats of violence. The George Washington University School newspaper said the decision was made following a student-led petition to remove the Catholic Supreme Court justice, but a source close to Justice Thomas tells Catholic news agency that he decided not to teach after receiving death threats, especially after Roe versus Wade was overturned. And for more on this story, including a look at some of the recent hostility against Justice Thomas, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. The American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology recently released a statement saying pro-life reproductive care providers may lose their certification because they do not promote abortions. The statement reads in part, quote, misinformation and disinformation about contraception and abortion can create false narratives about essential safe practices in the specialty, adding ABOG will review reports of dissemination of misinformation and disinformation about COVID-19, reproductive health care, contraception, abortion, and other OBGYN practices that may harm the patients we serve or public health. And joining us now to discuss is Donna Harrison, CEO of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Donna, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on. First off, I'd like to get your thoughts on the statement that was published. What do you think?
Well, this is just a naked attempt to try to silence pro-life OBGYNs who want to tell women about the real effects of abortion. And APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, has worked tirelessly over the last 50 years to bring out information about what abortion does to women, including the increased risk of preterm birth and increased risk of suicide, drug abuse, and hospitalizable depression, among many other things. So this is very uncomfortable information for ABOG and ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, because they're pro-abortion and they make no bones about it. They're rabidly pro-abortion and they don't want this information to be part of patient-informed consent, but we feel strongly that every woman has a right to know what could happen to her body as a real risk after abortion.
Yeah, and Donna, we read through the statement and noticed it really never defined or gave examples of what is considered to be misinformation or disinformation. It seems rather ambiguous. What does that concern you at all?
Well, it's clear that if ABOG came out and clearly said you can't give out information about the effects of abortion on women, that we would hold them to that and we would sue them. And if they say that this has nothing to do with information about abortion and its effects on women, we would also hold them to that. So my best guess of what they're doing is they can't say anything. They can just make this veiled threat to try to intimidate doctors, but we will not be intimidated. We will give accurate, informed consent to our patients, and we will continue to talk about the detrimental effects of abortion on women.
And what type of impact do you think this could have on patients, particularly those who are maybe morally or religiously opposed to abortion?
If ABOG continues with its threat, its veiled threat, and it tries to silence those of us who are giving evidence-based information to our patients, then that will cause the majority of OB-GYNs to cease doing OB-GYN, because you can't practice OB-GYN without board certification, and they know that. So this is the bludgeon that they are using to silence us from giving accurate, informed consent to our patients.
And I know your organization is pushing back. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we did retain legal counsel along with Christian Medical Dental Association, and we will protect our membership, because what ABOG is doing is not right. It's not right from a medical standpoint. It's not right from a legal standpoint. They are supposed to be accrediting doctors based on their skills and knowledge, not based on whether or not they agree with ABOG's pro-abortion stance. And I think ultimately it will hurt ABOG, but in the meantime, if they do remove the accreditation from doctors, that will hurt the ability of pro-life OB-GYNs to practice, and will also hurt the ability of healthcare systems like the Catholic healthcare system to have physicians that are in line with their ethical directives.
Donna, we probably have less than maybe 30 seconds left or so, but I quickly want to get your thoughts on this. Georgia's Department of Revenue announced earlier this week that unborn children can be considered dependents, and taxpayers can qualify for a $3,000 tax exemption. This after a number of companies announced earlier this summer that they would cover travel expenses for employees that are seeking abortions. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm glad that Georgia is recognizing that the human beings in the womb deserve the same kinds of protections and benefits that the human beings outside the womb do. So I just APLOG applauds Georgia for this foresight, this very good piece of legislation.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, the head of the Knights of Columbus tells us about the first in-person Supreme Convention in 3 years. Plus, fire engulfs a historic hospital in Turkey. We have the latest. The 140th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus wrapped up today in Nashville, Tennessee. Nearly 2,500 Knights attended the first in-person Supreme Convention in 3 years. The event included mass, awards, and the annual report from Supreme Knight Patrick Kelly. Recently, we spoke with the Supreme Knight about the convention and some of the group's important initiatives. And joining us now is Patrick Kelly, Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. Mr. Supreme Knight, great to see you. This is the first in-person convention in a few years, and I know you're first as Supreme Knight. Can you tell us what it's like to be back, and what have been some of the highlights?
Well, it's great to be back in person, and there's a tremendous amount of energy here with all of our members of the Knights of Columbus and their families. It's been 3 years since we've met in person, so there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and we enjoy being with one another. That's what our faith is all about, and that's what we're about as Knights, is being together.
Yeah, and I understand there was an awards ceremony where some of the Knights were honored for their work in the community. Can you tell us more about that and the work that some of your brother Knights are doing?
Yeah, well, we give awards for Family of the Year, and we give a faith award, award on life, on community. And so we celebrate the accomplishments of the members of the Knights, but we focused a lot on at this convention about the Eucharistic revival that's upcoming, and the fact that we as Knights are going to be partnering with our bishops and with our pastors and really ramping up devotion to Christ in the Eucharist. So we're focusing on that. We're also focusing on this tremendous opportunity presented to us in a post-Roe world, and we really need as Knights to step up to be there for the vulnerable mother and her unborn child. We announced a new program called ASAP, Aid and Support After Pregnancy. So our councils are really going to be partnering with pregnancy resource centers to give them the resources that they need to help women in need.
And that is so fantastic. I also understand that this was the first time the Blessed Michael McGivney Medal was awarded. Can you talk to us about the significance of this award, what the medal represents, and also who the recipient was?
Yeah, so the medal represents, and it's as you say, it's a new award, and we give it to a chaplain within the Knights who's really been exemplary in the last year, and who's embodied the principles of Michael McGivney. This year, it went to Father Keller, who was a state chaplain in New Mexico, and he's just done tremendous work in terms of helping the poor and helping the underprivileged. And it really embodies the principles that McGivney founded the order with: charity, unity, and fraternity. So it's a new award, but we really want to honor our priests because they are a part of everything the Knights of Columbus do. So that's what the award is about.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. We're grateful.
Yes, thank you very much, Tracy. It was great to be with you.
A new report says legal abortions in Poland last year fell by 90%. The newspaper study is based on data from the Ministry of Health. The drop coincides with the country passing a measure to ban abortion in the case of a medical diagnosis such as Down syndrome. Well, in Turkey, fire damages a historic Greek hospital with roots dating back to the 1500s. The fire broke out this afternoon on the roof of Valiki Greek Hospital in Istanbul. A statement from the Greek Archbishop of America says patients and staff were safely evacuated. The cause of the fire is unknown. Up next, how Pope Francis is praying for the care of creation. Plus, a promotion for a nurse in Vatican City. Pope Francis has released his message for the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation next month. The Holy Father says everything that breathes should sing praise to our Lord. But Pope Francis also says the song is accompanied by a cry of anguish because of the destruction of the Earth's ecosystems. The World Day of Prayer is September 1st. It begins the season of creation, running until October 4th, the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi. Joining us now is John Mundell, environmental engineer and new director of the Laudato Si Platform for Action. John, great to see you. Can you tell us more about the Pope's message for the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation?
Well, since 2015, the ecumenical season of creation begins with this World Day of Prayer on September 1st and then goes through till October 4th that marks the feast of St. Francis. And this year's ecumenical message is and theme is listen to the voice of creation. And Pope Francis, asks us and invites us to listen carefully to this voice and hear in it the dissonance and the conflict that arises between, on the one hand, the sweet song and praise of our beloved Creator, who made all creation to live in harmony with each other. And on the other hand, to hear the chorus of cries of anguish that come from the earth itself, that come from the creatures that suffer, that they're coming from the poor who are disproportionately feeling the impacts of climate change events like droughts and floods and hurricanes and extreme temperatures.
Yeah, John, I know that you've recently been appointed as the new director of the Laudato Si Platform for Action, as we mentioned. What does this role, what does it mean to you, and what are your goals?
Well, first of all, it's an incredible opportunity to help the message of Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si become a reality with concrete lived actions by not only the Catholic faithful, but also by people who are of other Christian denominations or interreligious other world religions, or even people with no religions. You know, the challenge before us is clear and it's immense. You know, our climate is changing and causing significant impacts around the globe. People are suffering. We've spent the last 7 years since Laudato Si doing a lot of talking and discussing and praying, but the real work really lies ahead. And so we must, you know, now begin to take concrete action that are reflective in a choice of our lifestyles and our lives.
And John, before I let you go, for the conversion that the Holy Father is requesting, what are some of the things do you think the faithful can do, you know, in our daily lives to help out?
Well, first of all, the conversion needs to start with a certain amount of personal mindfulness of how we're living our faith in each moment of each day. This doesn't happen easily unless it's grounded in some kind of time for reflection or contemplation or prayer. You know, we need to grab those short moments when we wake up, when we're in the shower, when we're heading to work, wherever we can, to kind of do a self-audit of our lives, an examination of conscience, so that, you know, we can really ask ourselves, how are we really living? You know, what resources are we using that are needed and which are wasted? And how do we purchase? Why do we purchase? And what are we purchasing? You know, and after reviewing these basics, you know, things like how much food do we waste or how much trash do we generate, it really helps us bear a lot of fruit in our daily lives. So we go from that reflection to action, and we need to kind of think of small things we can do each day, something that's easy to remember. You know, I came up a few years ago with this idea of the Earth cube. I put it in the context here, but it's a cube you roll every day, and you roll it and you read what comes up to the top. And so it's very simple. I recommend people think of something simple to do. But today, my cube came up with this. Now is the time. Now is the time. To me, today, that means that I have to be urgent. I have to think of what I can do today. I can't put it off till tomorrow. So simply find a small message to put into action every day, and that small action can have real impacts.
Yeah, well, wonderful last thought to leave it on right there. John, thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations. And finally tonight, Pope Francis promotes a nurse whom he credits for saving his life. Massimiliano Strappetti, seen at the Pope's side during last week's visit to Canada, now becomes the Holy Father's personal health care assistant as part of a medical team which monitors the Pope's health at all times. Strappetti receives the post for accurately diagnosing the Holy Father's intestinal problem last year. Ollie, thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.